there's fewer and fewer places where we're allowed to mine. We need better and better technology. We have to find a better way to do it. The numbers are very, very daunting. The numbers are quite mind-blowing. We've used 700 million metric tons of copper to get here today. And we could get it back by tearing down every building in the world and restoring the status quo ante to 10,000 years ago when we were hunting woolly mammoths. Now, we're going to use another 700 million metric tons at current consumption in the next 18 years. So we have to mine as much copper in the next 18 years as we mined in the last 10,000 years to maintain 3% global GDP growth. Now, that's without electric cars and data centers.
Welcome to Smarter Markets, a weekly podcast featuring the icons and entrepreneurs of technology, commodities, and finance, ranting on the inadequacies of our systems and riffing on ideas for how to solve them. Together, we examine the questions: are we facing a crisis of information or a crisis of trust? And will building smarter markets be the antidote? This episode is brought to you in part by Abax Exchange, bringing better price discovery and risk management tools to navigate today's commodities markets through centrally cleared, physically deliverable futures contracts in energy, environmental, battery materials, and precious metals markets. Smarter Markets are here.
Welcome to a special Smarter Markets episode, Subterranean Supply Chain Blues. I'm Dave Greely, Chief Economist at Abax Technologies. Our guest today is Robert Friedland, Chairman of Ivanhoe Mines and co-founder, Chairman, and CEO of iPulse. Robert sat down with us after his keynote at the FT Commodities Global Summit in Lausanne, Switzerland, where he shared his perspectives on the current state of the world and the role of metals, mining, and markets in it. Well, Smarter Markets is back in Lausanne, Switzerland for the 15th annual FT Commodities Global Summit, and we are privileged to be joined by our friend Robert Friedland, fresh off a keynote address. And, when I looked at the conference this year, one of the things that struck me, Robert, is so much more conversation around metals and critical minerals than in other years. It's really seems like it's taken over about half of the conversation. You've been, kind of the voice in the wilderness for many years, pushing people that we need to focus on this. What do you think? Are people waking up to the need for metals?
We're in the foothills of the Himalayas. It's P.T. Barnum said that if you want to get somebody to understand something, you should tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then tell them what you told them, and it might sink in. Yeah. But the problem is that the supply chain is just a mystical concept to people that live in an urban environment, and they just don't get it. And suddenly we're in a situation where we might have to pay a lot more for hydrocarbon, and sort of a global shock. And nobody understands the tertiary implications opening soon at a theater near you. And you have all these freaked out traders here. They look like, when I was on that stage, I'm looking at the traders, they all look like deer caught in the headlights. Because they know volatility is coming. They just don't know in what direction they're trading, right? And you could get a Truth Social tweet coming over the tape at any second, right? And it could wipe you out. Good, bad, or indifferent. Now, we're miners, so it's a little different for the mining industry. But as I walked in the door right now, risk is off. People are getting nervous as you tick-tock towards deadline. You can see it. The oil price is just creeping up the last few minutes, and the risk is feeling off. People are very nervous. And it has a dreamlike quality to it, doesn't it? Do you remember that time we went to that FT Financial Summit, did an interview with Robert Friedland the day before? Something happened.
TBD, coming soon. And, it was interesting because this morning on the oil panel, right, I don't think I've ever seen as frustrated a group of individuals on a panel because they're trying to get across this, look, this has already happened. The bomb has gone off, and now we're just waiting to see how much damage it's created. But still, people, markets seem to be walking through in a dreamlike state. Is it strictly ignorance of the supply chain, or is there something more human about it?
No, we grew up on that Roadrunner cartoon when he runs off the cliff and everything's fine till he looks down.
Yeah.
And no, it's a vue-day phenomenon. We've never, since World War II, lived with a potential disruption at this scale in so many critical raw materials simultaneously. And money's a coward. It runs at the first sign of trouble. I mean, you just imagine Dubai or Abu Dhabi. All the girls have left. Streets are empty. These places are built on tourism. And the airlines aren't flying. And so it starts in Asia. And we know the real price of oil if you have a shipload. And we know the paper price is not sending the correct signal. In fact, it's a fiction. And we've known this for a long time on the LME. We saw fictional pricing in nickel and various other commodities. And I just put out a tweet reminding people that the Hong Kong Stock Exchange owns the LME. So these signals are broken. And that's why I think ABAX is so important, is that we need a kind of market that is, that all these markets are interconnected. Even a wind market is connected to a copper market, to an oil market. And the signals under traditional pricing are clearly broken. Now the emperor has no clothes. Brent's trading at 95 unless you have a boatload of it, and that's 155 in the Philippines, right? And what amazing, right? It's just, and that causes you to suspect metal pricing as well. These prices. Let's say I come from a country on the Gulf and I have a lot of liquidity, and I want to buy $50 billion worth of gold or silver or copper this afternoon. What's 50 billion when you got 2-3 trillion in sovereign wealth funds? Nothing position. But if you actually wanted to buy $50 billion worth of gold today, or silver, or copper, what would the real price actually be? So, you just have people trading against each other, and it's so apparent that, if you study World War I or World War II, some of these commodities went to infinity. If you have to have it, you have to have it. And they get rationed by price. Huh?
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who understands the supply chain, some of these impacts, I heard you in your keynote talking about diesel and the impact that's having on miners. How big an impact do you think that's going to have?
The only way I've been able to express it, think about it, is this is much bigger than COVID. Now, you remember that 2.5-year period where you were locked in your house? Like I was in Singapore. Like, was that really 2.5 years? But in Singapore, they had a very strict lockdown. Like, if you were a foreigner and you violated the lockdown, you could get a spanking. That was like 2.5 years of my life. I mean, everybody lived through COVID, but we kind of forgot about it, right? Like, people are flying around and there's still COVID around, but people just got tired of wearing masks. But I think this will dwarf COVID. If this goes much further, this will absolutely dwarf COVID. We will remember the pre-Hormuz period and the post-Hormuz period. This is one of these things that we're all going through together. COVID kind of changed everybody's thinking about life. Right. It really did. And the United States created an orgy of debt and monetary creation. And we went from 60 yen to the dollar to 160 yen to the dollar for the third largest economy in the world. Imagine if you want to buy anything, and just the price of gold has gone up like a zillionfold in Japan, the Japanese people. And so it's all how you look at it. What if the dollar's next? What if the next phenomenon is a severe weakening of the dollar? What are these prices going to be?
Yeah. And just the overall impact on our lives, like as you talked about pre and post COVID and what could happen now pre and post this conflict with Iran, it takes me back. I'm old enough to remember, airlines before deregulation. And if you took 1 or 2 trips, in 10 years, that was a big thing to do.
Yeah. Well, we already see airports are getting quite deserted. When you take Emirates down on half their flights and some of the Middle Eastern airlines, and then in Singapore and Asia, they're getting very nervous about kerosene. So you suddenly get a quick, serious your aunt and uncle are calling, like, what's going on here? I came from California 2 weeks ago when this was really getting heated up in an Uber car. It was a big black Uber car, the big one. You don't get the big one, the SUV, and it was a diesel. And the guy asked me if we could get fuel. He wanted fuel. It was $8.20 a gallon. And I don't remember, I thought, usually I don't fill in my own pump. And I thought, wow, that's more expensive than I thought it was. Right?
That's a big gas tank.
And the driver was extremely agitated about it. So I don't think it's even started. I think a better analogy would be The Matrix. Remember that film?
Yeah.
When that bullet's slowing down, it's very slow. It is moving, though. You have to get out of the way. It's sort of like we're living in a very slow motion train wreck where these traders, deal in microseconds and their instincts are in their fingertips. But the world is walking around actually like everything's completely normal. Isn't that kind of strange?
It's very strange.
Like your brain says, if this happens, then that might happen, that might happen, and then this. And you could lay awake at night having night sweats staring at the ceiling if you're a trader and you're long a position that gets wiped out if it goes the wrong way. Now, I'm just imagining what it'd be like to be a trader, but you must have nerves of steel, I suppose. Miners are in a different position because we're cooking a meal that we set up 10, 20 years ago. And there's not much we can do about it. We certainly don't want to run out of diesel fuel, right? Because you hate shutting the mine down. Your miners don't like that. The host government doesn't like that. So now...
Is that a serious threat right now?
Of course. A lot of remote mines in the world generate their electricity by burning diesel. No diesel, no electricity. And you need uninterruptible power 24 hours a day to run a mine. So many remote mines all over the world are burning diesel to operate. And, we're calculating the impact on cash costs with every increase per penny in the liter of diesel. But it's not so much the price, it's the availability. Because if metals prices rise because more mines are closing, let's say 10% of the copper mines in the world close, then we get a jump in the copper price. We can afford to pay more, but it's the availability because it may be diverted to the military before it goes to civilian applications.
And one of these chains that you brought up in your keynote was on sulfur, which is something that most people don't think about.
It's the king of chemicals.
Can you explain a little bit of some of the uses? Because it's...
No, nobody thinks about sulfuric acid. They don't even know what it is. You see, this is why suddenly everybody's going to get a very rapid education in everything. So H2SO4. H2SO4, it primarily comes from the desulfurization of sulfur-bearing natural gas. Like in Alberta, Canada, they pull the sulfur out of the gas. It ends up in a big yellow pile of sulfur on Vancouver Harbor. By the way, all of that's now going to the Congo to try to keep the mines running. But you have to transport the sulfur, and then you have to convert it back into sulfuric acid. And when we built our copper smelter in Africa, we assumed $150 a ton to as a byproduct that we could sell it for $150 a ton. Now, we calculated that number by buying the yellow sulfur in Alberta, bringing it by ship, adding water, and ass backwards calculating that at $150 we'll break even. But today it's $700, $800, $900 a ton and going up. And you can't buy that stuff. It's already been sold over there. And so the pump won't work because the vandals took the handle. Now that gets me back to Bob Dylan. Before his name was Bob Dylan, it was Bob Zimmerman. When he started out as a folk singer. And his first great rap song was Subterranean Homesick Blues. You should play it. There are two great lines in that song. One is, the pump won't work because the vandals took the handle. That's the last line in the song. And he's referring to the supply chain. Remember they used to have a pump? And you had to pump the water? If the vandals took the handle, then you couldn't get any water. And the other one was, you don't need a weatherman to know the way the wind blows. Very quickly, people get the idea that, well, maybe life is more fragile than I thought, and that ham sandwich doesn't come from the refrigerator. And suddenly my fuel bill is doubled or my electricity bill is doubled. In California today, people are paying 38 cents a kilowatt hour for residential power. And this thing hasn't even started yet, right? I mean, it used to be 8 cents. Suddenly people get a multi-$1,000 electricity bill. They freak.
Oh, yeah.
They just freak out, right? And now multiply this as a global phenomenon, and then you realize how valuable that piece of real estate is. Location, location, location. There's the Strait of Hormuz. There's another one, the Strait of Malacca, near Singapore. Suddenly these places become insanely important because people realize those molecules have to move.
Everybody needs to get a map out. And one thing, molecule, I want to go back to the sulfur piece because, it's used in mining to leach out the copper. It's also used in fertilizer production.
Can't make fertilizer without it. And it's also used in high quality sulfuric acid is how you need it to make semiconductors.
Okay.
You want to have an Apple phone?
So we need it for our phones, we need it for our food, we need it for the metal that we need for power, that we also
50%,
need for defense.
50% of what goes into an electric car is hydrocarbon, oil, 50%. So all that fiberglass and plastic to lightweight that electric car, that's all hydrocarbon. Suddenly you can't build the electric car because you don't have the natural gas. Like, people have no idea how this all fits together. They don't understand why these lights are on, how we generated the power in the first place, how we transmitted it, and then how we utilize that power, how fragile everything is, and how it all fits together. And it really is very frustrating to try to explain to people that we live in a very delicate balance. It took us thousands of years to get here. There's 8 billion of us. And the most destructive thing of all is war, because apart from its sheer stupidity and the suffering it creates, is that not only all these munitions are metals intensive, and it's not recycled when they drop these bombs. They're loaded with these metals, but then the destruction. What does it take to rebuild a Gaza or a Ukraine or an Iran after you destroy it? It's so metals intensive. And markets, as you know, are made at the margin. I can hold my phone out here for an hour. It's a nice little isometric exercise. Just put your phone out there, and after 10 minutes, your arm will get tired. And after an hour, your arm's a little shaky. But after an hour, you put a feather out there, it'll break your arm, because markets are made at the margin. And we're talking 30% or 40% of the helium in the world, without which you cannot launch a rocket ship or make a semiconductor, or 30% or 40% of the sulfuric acid. If this disruption persists, it's going to be completely psychedelic. They'll be making a television series about it, sort of like Breaking Bad. Starts sort of slow, but by the 3rd year, the 7th episode, you're going, oh my God, how'd they dream this up? Yeah. So, next year, maybe people have to crawl to this conference. Yeah.
We back on horse-drawn carts.
Yeah. Who knows? Like, what an interesting life we're living in. Very interesting times. Are they going to be able to make a rational deal that sticks?
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. In terms of the level of understanding, you talk to a lot of policymakers. I won't ask you to name names, but how would you gauge the level of understanding of these supply chain issues among the political decision makers?
I think that the good news is, I'm talking about in the American government now. Okay. I think there's some really intelligent people that have fully taken to heart that we have a really serious long-term issue because we deindustrialized the United States. Everything at Walmart said made in China, and we're content to let the Chinese do all the hard work and suffer the pollution, the air pollution, the water pollution. And it was a microwave oven or a washing machine, electric toothbrush. It always said made in China. In fact, this Apple phone would say, designed in California. Designed in California. That's what they put. So like everything you touched, and it gets to a point where a nation loses its sovereignty. It just loses its agency. Suddenly it becomes vulnerable to literally everything. And this current administration, I think there was an inkling in the first Trump administration, but there are at least serious people who said, wait a minute now, we have a problem here. And when I talked about that supply chain, when Roosevelt was lend-leasing to England at the beginning of World War II, the commodities were like coal and, maybe nickel and copper, some dumb oil. We gave it to Winston Churchill so they wouldn't get eaten by the Germans. But today's commodities are so much more sophisticated. Like people don't even know what scandium is, or rhenium, or tantalum, or niobium, or dysprosium. Go through the periodic table. When Steve made the first Apple I phone, it had about 18 elements in the periodic table. It's quite a lot. This one's around 74 elements in the periodic table. And without it, you can't do a TikTok or get hold of your kids. Like, people don't understand. We're going to go back to the Apple I here shortly. And then these are going to be like collector's items. And like for 5G, 5.5G, 6G wireless, you can't have it without scandium metal, for example. And people don't even know that scandium is a thing.
No.
Is it scandium? Like, what are you making it up? Like, what is it? So the world does not run on green cheese, and we do have, and we've been talking about this for a long time. But yes, I think the good news is that people are beginning to understand. Just take water. Have you ever bought a bottle of Perrier in Switzerland? And calculate the cost per barrel of water. It's like incredibly expensive. So probably the world's most expensive commodity will be clean, fresh water. 8 billion people need water. This place is, because you need energy to get the water. And if you're desalinating the ocean on those Gulf countries, they build nuclear power plants to desalinate the Gulf. The Gulf is very shallow, and they reject the salt into the ocean. So it's going to be the Great Salt Lake. They'll be able to walk across to Iran from Dubai, and they're taking that water, this desalinated water, and watering their golf course. Now that is not sustainable, because you're turning the Gulf into the Great Salt Lake, and then the Iranians can just walk across the Gulf. So there are so many things that are not sustainable. The ocean temperatures this year in the Western Pacific, the highest ever recorded. It may be related to El Nino, but we've never seen such hot oceans in recorded history. So we're going to have a doozy of a summer storm season. The whole global warming thing, is still out there. Yeah. I've experienced some really hot weather. I don't know about you, but I travel a lot, and it's been, I was up in Aspen at 9,000 feet a month ago, and it was 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and they'd never seen temperatures like that in Colorado in March. And there was no snow. We still have the issue of trying to deal with the potential for anthropomorphic global warming. And who's going to build all these electric cars out of what? And how are they going to be powered? And what about the grid? And what about all these data centers? Now, you've got states like Maine that have banned data centers, because when you put a data center, all of a sudden everybody's electricity bill triples and they get very cranky, right? So push is coming to shove, and people are realizing that there are vulnerabilities and resource-related issues. And then our markets have to be smarter to send the right price signals if you believe in the magic of the marketplace to dig our way out of this hole. That's why I think, Smarter Markets really is related to ABAX, and I think ABAX is extremely important. That's why I was involved in it from the beginning, is that it's very important to have quick, accurate, and realistic price signals. It's very important, no bullshit.
How does that, maybe you could give an example in your own line of work in the mining area, how it's important to you.
Well, we had fraudulent money, so it was like in the nickel market. Certain banks were exposed, and they were on the short side, and so you just see outright manipulation of the price signal on the LME. They just changed the rules. If the market makes too many participants unhappy, they just say, "Well, sorry, but we're not going to count those trades." And then what happens is very quickly you have no confidence in that marketplace. It takes a long time to build up a bazaar where people are ready to come together and trade. If you take the bazaar in Tehran, in Iran, they were getting pissed off at the Shah of Iran, the Bazaris, the guys that ran the market. And they were sufficiently cranky that you got the Ayatollah. Now they might get cranky again, but the marketplace is very important. When the marketplace doesn't give you accurate signals, then we're blind. What is the real value of wind? What is the value of wind or carbon credits or anything else? So hats off to ABAX and having Smarter Markets, and having these talks, because this is sort of stuck with an audience. How many, 200,000 or 300,000 people listen? Or how many people listen to Smarter Markets?
Oh, probably in a week, maybe 5 to 10,000. Your episodes always get more listeners.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're exceptionally handsome and intelligent, but I think those are kind of people that are intimately involved with markets. But this will now permeate out to the public, that they'll understand there are vulnerabilities. Like during the Biden administration, there were those stickers on the gas station that said Brandon did this, you know, and to the American population, that gasoline price is quite an indicator. Yeah. Now it's getting broader. People are starting to really think about these issues.
And I wanted to bring you back to something you were raising earlier on the scope for collaboration or the scope for a deal with Iran to move through this, because that really seems to be what markets, traders, the rest of us are banking on, is that this will all resolve very quickly and we'll all be okay.
It's very possible that there will be a deal. And then the next question is, how long will it stick? But I think, we do need to learn to live with each other. And you can only negotiate with your enemy, and you've got to reach a middle position. It's just that this is easier said than done. In this particular culture, I think it's a little bit easier said than done. Be great. The problem is that we're dealing with proxy players. So we're not just dealing with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. There's a proxy game going on with Russia in the background, and China, and the United States, and it's the biggest of all games. And there's room for error. And therefore, I do think that it's hard to be a peacemaker. And it's hard to reach an acceptable compromise. I'd prefer to see one for my grandkids, right? But for our children, our grandchildren, it'd be better to make a deal. But when you look at the history of our species, it's not very encouraging. We had a lot of wars lately. India had a war with Pakistan last May. I mean, that was like really scary. You got 250 million people in Pakistan, 1.4 billion in India. They start bombing each other. That could have gone pear-shaped. And the U.S. administration was able to intercede and calm that war down. But we were not a party to that war. The United States was not a party to that war. It's a little different when you're a protagonist and the enemy gets a vote. So, of course, as we sit here today, we hope for the best. And it's better to talk than not, isn't it? But these are really big issues of sovereignty. Like, I can have a nuclear weapon, you can't, or vice versa. Or, wait a minute, this is our territory. We want to charge an exit fee.
Yeah.
And
you mentioned in your talk today, like you've worked in 68 or 75 different countries.
We've actually worked in 68. We visited a lot more than that. Like, we've been to North Korea, for example, but we would never say we operated there. So you don't count that. The places where we've actually done things is about 68 countries, about 20 at the moment. We like some better than others. There are similarities, but one thing I mentioned is that there's smart people everywhere. Human beings are amazingly intelligent. No matter what country you go to, you find that the locals are sharp and they're keeping an eye on you. Nothing's easy. That's why diplomacy is such an interesting thing.
Right. And how key is that going to be? Because it's interesting, right? If you go back, 10, 20 years, right? You had the whole world is flat epoch of where you have cheap energy, open borders, supply chains that stretch around the world, just-in-time inventory. And now it seems like everyone's contracting back and is becoming a more fragmented world. Do you see, is that the next iteration we're in for? Or is there...
Tom Friedman at the New York Times is going to have to change his story. Yeah. We have definitely experienced a profound vulcanization of the world economy. And I always like to use Europe as an example. I don't really think the Germans are out to save the French anymore, or the French to save the British. I don't think they're even pretending. I think each nation state is worried about its supply chain for food and critical raw materials. Japan is clearly militarizing, with the support of the United States, by the way. And the two Koreas are really militarizing, both North and South, like crazy. They both are armaments manufacturers. Taiwan is turning into a huge porcupine to try to repel China. China's massive military budgets. India wants to be as big as China with more people, and they're going crazy. The Pakistanis get very nervous about India, and Iran has these amazing tunnels and missiles that with North Korean technology, and it goes on everywhere. Now the Dutch used to have no defense, and now they want to, now the Dutch have a big military budget. The Germans want to throw 100 billion euros to start to train an army. They never had one. And America, next year, the proposed military budget from the Trump administration is 1.5 trillion, up from 1 trillion last year. That's a 50% bump. Now, what is all this military expenditure made out of? Well, smarter markets have to figure it out, but it's not made out of green cheese or caviar, right? Or blue cheese. I mean, it's made out of metals. And it needs energy to make all this stuff. Like, that they're running low on interceptors and various types of ammunition. And we still have the enormous interest in the electrification of the automobile. But these things are competing now. Yeah.
No, and we've had, thinking back to your conversation with Roosevelt and Churchill, and for hundreds of years, right? First, the British Empire kept the seas open. Then the American Empire kept the seas open. Who's going to keep the seas open? Or do we have to get used to it?
Navies are a really big deal. Yeah. Really a big deal. Great Britain has only one nuclear submarine last time I checked. One. France has one. Russia's adding about 12 or 14 of them this year. And China, big numbers, like really big numbers. And so these nuclear submarines are really nasty. They can hide under the polar ice. They can creep up on you. And mines are not what they used to be. They have mines that sit on the bottom of the sea, and they listen acoustically for a ship to come by, and then they go up and chase the noise or chase the heat or the vibration of the hull. They're not like, and the Russians have torpedoes that self-cavitate in the water at 500, 600 kilometers an hour. And then drone warfare has just changed everything. And these drones, they know what you look like, and they could be coming for you or any of you, just you're coming to like drill a hole in your third eye. That's for the AI, right? Yeah. This is modern, like all this stuff that doesn't move fast is sort of obsolete because, you have a mother drone, and the mother drone releases her 10,000 baby drones. Some of them get through. Now you need some form of directed energy weaponry to shoot down the drones. And so the whole military-industrial complex is undergoing a revolution that is metals intensive. Now, where's this molecule of copper go? Does it go to the military, or does it go to generate power so that your daughter can look at TikTok, or to build a data center, right?
Yeah, which one's more dangerous?
TikTok is the most dangerous thing in the world. These kids' brains are being rotten to death with social media. They should ban it. So they're 21 years old. It's obviously dividing every nation into tribes, turning people against themselves. The social media just feeds you what you want to see until you turn into some kind of a zombie, right? Yeah.
It does. It certainly does.
And it does. You should see the stuff your kids are watching. It's mind-blowing. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Do you like Mike Zuckerberg? You like the guy?
No, I try to keep my kids off of that, to be honest. Yeah. My only hope is I feel like the younger generations, they come at it with a huge amount of skepticism. So I'm wondering if maybe being that generation that's grown up, immersed in it has given them a different take.
I went to the University of Southern California, and I gave a lecture about copper and how the world works to a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds. There was a whole ocean of them. And I found that these super young kids, that generation, are super worried about the world they're growing up in.
Right.
And they're very smart. And I got mobbed. I literally got mobbed. 4.3 million views of video some kid took of me talking, right? And I'm like a dinosaur. I'm talking about mining and copper, but they got it, they understood it, right? And they're deeply concerned about a lot of issues. There's some of them about global warming or how are they going to afford, what are they going to do with their life? Is AI going to take their world away from them? The robots going to do everything and they got nothing for them to do.
Well, kids are into turntables and vinyl records these days, so maybe we're going to turning the clock back.
Yeah. You need hydrocarbon to make a vinyl record. It's made out of oil.
So what advice would you have for the younger generation? Should they get into mining? You've always said it's not for intelligent people.
We need young people in mining because we need, geologists, mining engineers. But mining is not what it used to be. It's not like a guy with a burro and a pickaxe panning for some
Was
gold.
it ever that way in your lifetime, Robert?
Yeah, like, remember the Treasure of the Sierra Madre? Yeah, Humphrey Bogart. We don't need no stinking bodges, right? But no, mining is a very high-tech thing that benefits from all of the evolution of the science and technology we have today. We have remote sensing data. We have all manner of very sophisticated geophysical data, terabits of data we can generate to try to image what's in the earth non-invasively, like a CAT scan or MRI. Because we're trying to separate the haystack from the needle and just go after the goodies without disturbing the earth. And then after we find it, we have to get it out of the ground with less energy in a more sustainable way. And there's large parts of the earth where we're not allowed to go. I can't go mining in Russia, can't go mining in China, for example. But so because there's fewer and fewer places where we're allowed to mine, we need better and better technology. We have to find a better way to do it. The numbers are very, very daunting. The numbers are quite mind-blowing. We've used 700 million metric tons of copper to get here today. And we could get it back by tearing down every building in the world and restoring the status quo ante to 10,000 years ago when we were hunting woolly mammoths. Now we're going to use another 700 million metric tons at current consumption in the next 18 years. So we have to mine as much copper in the next 18 years as we mined in the last 10,000 years to maintain 3% global GDP growth. Now that's without electric cars and data centers. That's accretive. That's when you have an energy transition that's on top of that. And when you waste all this copper on war, then it gets even harder. War is like really stupid, because it chews up astronomical amounts of metal that's frequently not recyclable. When a shell blows up in Ukraine, boom, the copper in that shell is scattered all over hell and gone. It's very hard to recycle it.
Well, and you brought up something during your keynote that really kind of blew my mind. You talked about the amount of explosives that have been used so far in Ukraine.
Yeah. The conventional explosives equaled World War II, absent Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs, just in Ukraine. People don't understand just the incredible volume of shells that went back and forth. We drew down the inventory of 155 millimeter howitzer shells to the point where it's going to take the United States 8 or 10 years to replace the ones we lent the Ukrainians. So all these armaments factories are in overtime trying to refill these arsenals. You saw Rheinmetall, the German stock, just went to infinity. People need, and this is conventional armaments. This is just like things that go boom. So that shell casing is made out of steel or brass. That bullet is made out of brass, that's made out of copper and zinc. Like, people have no idea, how you make a cannon or what it shoots. I met the Chinese leadership of Norinco. That's the monopoly armaments company in China. And they gave me a beautiful model tank as a gift. It was the most beautiful model tank. And the whole board of directors, all their top management was there. And I said to the chairman, boss, how much copper is in that tank? And they were all chain smoking with blue smoke, and they got into an intensive argument amongst themselves. And then the boss came and he said, Mr. Friedland, we've thought it over. There's almost no copper in that tank. And I looked at him like, really? He said, but there's a huge amount of what it shoots. And they all broke out laughing. So they're using millions of tons of copper in armaments, and that's competing with the copper for your new microwave oven or washing machine or electric toothbrush or your new little, your little server rack or your new phone. And that's just copper. Imagine all the other elements that are in here. It's like, the European Economic Union, when you have that green circuit board, right, and it's got all those electronics, we used to use lead to solder that circuit board. Then the European Economic Union said, no. You can't use lead because when you throw it away, lead becomes a bioaccumulative poison in the environment. You have to use tin. So just that one change, tin prices are going up like, you need a telescope, look at the price of tin. So people had no idea about any of this, right?
I wanted to ask you one last question because you've been someone who's spent their life in a business where you're having to think 20 years ahead and invest in projects where you won't, see the fruits of your labor for decades. And now we're at a conference, lots of traders, as you said, they're thinking minute to minute.
No, microsecond.
Microsecond.
Millionths of a second.
Like, how do you think about navigating this type of an environment where there's so much volatility, such potential extreme outcomes, but you need to make decisions and you need to be thinking 10, 20 years ahead?
Well, I don't want to scare you, but
you already have. It's
in an audience of traders, people move their automated trading systems right next to the COMEX or the NYMEX to save a millionth of a second. But now with these AI systems, I identify you, I find your address, I know where you live, I know where you go to Starbucks at 3 o'clock, I know your habits. And I'm going to send a drone to kill you. So the signal goes to a low Earth orbiting satellite, that's Elon's, Starlink, and it comes down in about 27 millionths of a second. So uplink, 26 millionths of a second, maybe 27 millionths, down 27 millionths of a second. So the AI is primarily a military technology because it has to find you and separate the needle from the haystack and knows your movements. In China, they can recognize every face in China with those cameras. And so it's all about data. If I'm a millionth of a second faster than you, you die. I don't. You're sending your drone to get me. I'm sending my drone to get you. Now, imagine that aircraft carrier. If you have a convoy going through the Strait of Hormuz, and let's say it's a mile long, 2 miles long. By definition, that convoy is going at the speed of the slowest ship. Right. Otherwise, it's not a convoy. And you got these ULCCs, VLCCs, or these ultra-large crude carriers. They're full of oil. They're going pretty slow. They're going about, maybe you could run that faster, right? And these hypersonic missiles are going at Mach 6, Mach 8. And it's only 10 miles to go. That's So your technology has moved so fast in the understanding that with AI, I can kill the other guy, or I can build robots like Terminator. But the imagination of science fiction, the speed of technology is moving much faster than our ability to mine the copper, to build the data centers, to run those military equipments. And now we're understanding that without these metals, you can't build these military systems. And that means that the mines themselves have become a national security issue. Meaning, if I have a better mine than you do, you die, I don't. And we didn't have this 10 years ago. We saw this coming, but we used to fight wars over crude oil. I doubt we would have gone after Saddam Hussein if he didn't have any crude oil. Now we know that these metals are at the center of the conversation amongst the cognoscenti who understand what we're talking about here. Yes. But this is beginning to permeate out into social media. If you follow X, people are beginning to understand. They get a lot of conspiracy theories that are a little bit wild about it. But basically, everything we touch, you either mined it or we grew it agriculturally, like my glasses here. They're made out of hydrocarbon, and we mine the glass to make these glasses. And don't even get me started with all your electronics or all this radiation going through your head with your AirPods. There's very sophisticated technology in these things, but they need our minds.
Glad you've been building them. Thanks for elevating our conversation, Robert.
It's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it, Even my room key's made out of brass here. Feel how heavy that is. Yeah, there's copper in that, Yeah. If you get a pink gold watch, why is it pink? Because they add a little copper to the gold, dude. That's how you get a pink gold watch. They call it rose gold, right? Copper and gold.
Copper's in everything.
It's in your Rolex. Okay, well, thank you for that.
Thanks very much.
Hope that was understandable.
Oh, completely.
We love ABAX. All best regards to Joe and Josh and all the guys at ABAX. Fantastic company.
I'll send it along.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert. Really appreciate it. Thanks again to Robert Friedland, chairman of Ivanhoe Mines and co-founder, chairman, and CEO of iPulse. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll be back next week with a special episode of Smarter Markets Presents Scenes from the FT Commodities Global Summit 2026. We hope you'll join us.
This episode is brought to you in part by Abax Exchange, bringing better price discovery and risk management tools to navigate today's commodities markets through centrally cleared, physically deliverable futures contracts in energy, environmental, battery materials, and precious metals markets. Smarter Markets are here. Contact sales at abax.exchange to get started. That concludes this week's episode of Smarter Markets by Abax. For episode transcripts and additional episode information, including research, editorial, and video content, please visit smartermarkets.media. Please help more people discover the podcast by leaving a review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. Smarter Markets is presented for informational and entertainment purposes only. The information presented on Smarter Markets should not be construed as investment advice. Always consult a licensed investment professional before making investment decisions. The views and opinions expressed on Smarter Markets are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the show's hosts or producer. Smarter Markets, its hosts, guests, employees, and producer, Abax Technologies, shall not be held liable for losses resulting from investment decisions based on informational viewpoints presented on Smarter Markets. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week.